Oi oi, welcome back to Toad. My name's Alex, and you join me again in the out of focus void, but this time it's December, so it's Christmas. I haven't decorated. I'm a university student, what do you expect? But this time I'm going to be what this means is I'm going to be starting a new army. This army is Black Templars because I love knights and space knights are cool. And I also like not very nice space knights, so Black Templars seem like a pretty good fit for me. I know they're not chaos, but I figured it was finally time to dip my toes into the Imperium. However, I will be mainly building this army out of chaos kits. Because why not? I don't want to make this army easy. Primaris are fine. I think they're perfectly serviceable. I'd just personally rather use more FIRSTBORN style kits. So we'll go with this. Now, this is the first in the series where I will be building the army, like I said. However, I would not recommend this army series to anybody who doesn't have a lot of expendable income. I'm an idiot who doesn't know how to spend his money properly, hence why I've decided to make this army. It's gonna be rather expensive and involve a lot of specialist bits and kits. So only really do this army if you feel that you're able to. Otherwise, with that, I'll tell you as and when I use kits in the video, and we'll get on with it.
For the first step, I needed to repeat what I did last time. I cut the bodies of a Plague Marine and a Chaos Space Marine Havoc apart at the belt line. Once the legs and torso had been separated, I took the opportunity to carefully remove the folds from the Havoc's leg. That's the little side flaps that they have. But following this, I took my scalpel and removed all of the major spikes from the trim found on the legs. Now, I wanted to keep the trim as to me it made the model feel more important and grandiose, as it was my goal for this army to, in essence, make a character army model. Which sounds stupid, but hopefully I can pull it off in the end. As I want this to be the entire first company of a Crusader fleet of Black Templars. But once I'd removed the more chaosy parts, I did leave on the skull detail on the knee, as what Gothic architecture doesn't have gargoyles? I used my heavy-duty scalpel to separate the legs at the knee. I wasn't careful when it came to cutting through the ribbing, as I then immediately shaved the rest of it off, so that I was left with just the armour pieces. This is because I wanted to repose the model so that it was leaping forwards, to really accentuate that flying feeling. So, with the reposing process, I next had to use my pin vise to drill holes in the different segments of the legs. I then took some paper clips, placed them into the holes, and cut them to length with a pair of old hobby snips. Then I dry fisted all the parts together and bent the paper clips like an armature to get a pose that I was happy with. This being one of the model leaping off of its base. I then solidified this all with super glue, and when it dried, I came in with some Milliput Superfine White with a tiny amount of green stuff added to make the ribbing between the armour panels. This was done by placing a ball over the exposed paperclip, and then using my hobby knife to score thin concentric lines across the miller stuff. I also used this to attach the torso to the legs, and left this to dry fully. Once this was dry, I again mixed up a ball of roughly 50-50 mixture of green stuff and milliput, creating Rilliput. This was just with normal milliput, I should say. This has the best parts of both sculpting mediums, but sometimes has some trouble with adhesion, so you may need to use some superglue to affix this to the model. But I took the ball and with a Ziploc bag lubricated with water and rolled out a rectangle big enough to wrap around the whole waist of the model, which is exactly where it's going. I placed it on the waist and used a mixture of pinching motions with my fingers and my sculpting tools to create a flowing robe and to add a significant amount of motion to the model. The secret to good looking capes and robes is to add lots of folds, similar to a plastic part has, like one of these capes that are flying around on screen right now, opposed to a flat bit of sculpting. But when I had a shape I was happy with, in my case it had a fold in the middle and each side bent slightly upwards, I took another smaller rectangle that I cut out of the Grilliput. I then also ripped the base slightly to create more of a damaged feel, and placed this on the front as a tabard, in order to create a look similar to the Blade Guard Ancient model's robes. I then pushed this backwards between the legs and set the body aside so that I could let gravity do the majority of the work in regards to maintaining the angle of the ropes. But do not be afraid to keep retrying until you get a look you are happy with. You may well even need to leave the Gorilla Putt to dry for a bit. But again, just take your time and be slow with the sculpting medium. It's the best advice I can give. However, moving on to the left arm, I simply took an arm holding a sword outstretched. This is one from the Bravery Upgrade kit, and an axe from the Black Templars Martial kit. I then measured the parts up together, and using my hobby knife, I cut the sword off about halfway down the forearm. I then made small cuts on the arm till I was happy with the fit of the axe on the arm. This was then fixed in palace. Oh, I wrote palace. What idiot wrote this? This was then fixed in place with plastic cement. For the right arm, I wanted to make this the banner-wielding arm, and for this I figured that what was more Black Templars than turning a banner into a literal weapon. So I turned to the Grey Knight Strike Squad and took one of the spears. I think they're called a Nemesis 4-stave? Please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But I used my knife to cut the blade off of the top of the spear. I then took this banner from the Cities of Sigmar Dark Riders kit, as I like the eagle motif, as it's going on a jump pack unit. And I removed the top of the spear and the bottom attachment detail with my hobby knife to leave two flat surfaces. I then used my pin vise to drill a hole in the top of the spear shaft, and the top and the bottom of the banner, and the base of the spear blade part that was from the Grey Knights kit. I also then took this opportunity to drill a hole in the hand and the arm I chose. The arm is from the Ravenwing Command Squad kit, and in order to increase the angle that the spear was held at, I then repeated the posing step from earlier, before again using super glue to fix everything in place. Following this, I took some thin jeweler's chain in order to chain the spear to the Templar. Pin the tail on the donkey? Chain the spear to the Templar. Anyway, that's another idea for another time. I then placed a dab of thin superglue at the start point, before gently placing the chain in the thin superglue until it's set, making sure to leave a small amount on the other side of the superglue. This will make sense in a bit. I then wrapped the chain around the hand and the arm until I felt it looked suitably chained, and used more thin superglue to fix it in place, again leaving a length of chain unglued. I then used a pair of old hobby snips to cut the rest of the chain off. With the two lengths I left off, I held the spear at an angle that meant they were hanging in the same direction as the banner that was flowing, if that makes sense, and then made them more solid with the superglue. This is to create some flowing chain and again add more motion. But once this had dried, I followed the same step of rolling out some Gorilla Putt in a long rectangle, but instead I cut it into thin strips in order to act as purity seals. I took two strips, attached them together at the top and placed them running down the shaft of the spear banner thing creation, using the two lengths of chain at the end as points in order to provide support for the purity seals. This is another reason why I wanted to make the little extra bits of chain. I then simply placed a dab of superglue at the top and attached a small purity seal. Moving on to the backpack, and as the title of this video suggests, I'm going to be using a jump pack. This one is from the Vanguard Veterans kit. I also wanted to add some back detail, like a relic or some such. So I took this backpack from the Dark Angels Veterans kit and removed the back detail. I then dry fitted it against the jump pack, where there were two rivets in the way, so I shaved them off and used plastic cement to affix the back detail. And once this had dried, I repeated the purity seal step from earlier in order to add some more motion to the model. I like my motion in models, and I really feel that this is one of the best ways to make models that are flying actually seem like they're flying. But I would highly recommend attaching them together at the end in order to create the overall purity seal, in order to make the overall purity seal stronger, like this. I again left this to fully dry in a position that meant that it wouldn't sag or droop. For the shoulder pads of the model, I took one shoulder pad with the Crux Terminatus, this is meant to be a veteran, but for the left arm, I wanted to go for something a bit more extreme. And for this, I took a normal Chaos Space Marine shoulder pad, again removing the spikes, before then sticking on one of the old Free Guild Guard shields on the shoulder pad. This little step isn't necessary and you can do the next step without this, However, I have access to this part, and I wanted to do this extra step. If you also have access to this part, I would recommend doing it, as it does add a really nice little bit of detail to the model. But I then took a ball of milliput and spread it over the shield, or the shoulder pad if you haven't stuck the shield on, and cut 4 triangles out of each of the corners. And then simply I cut another subsequent 4 triangles out of the remaining chevrons, like so, in order to create the Maltese cross that adorns most Black Templar shoulders. And if you're not happy with the results, please feel free to redo the Maltese cross. I think I redid it like 3 times before I was happy with it. There are multiple styles of Maltese cross, and I'd say go with whichever one you feel your army would suit the best. But lastly, I moved on to the assembly of the model. I started by using super glue to attach this bit of parchment from the Loyalist Space Marine vehicle sprue over the tabard. I also put 2 more dabs of super glue on each side of the waist, and on the left hand side I put on one of the sensors from the Dark Angels Veterans kit, and on the left I put the book from the Mephiston kit on it. Though this is because I wanted a book that was suitably thin, and on top of this I am planning on using the Mephiston kit further in this army project, so you'll likely see that in future. I also took some more milliput and repeated the step on the right shoulder pad, but only doing half of the Maltese cross on the chest of the Marine, coming out from the neck hole. This was just to bulk up the chest a bit, and again, add some more Black Templar flair. I then drilled a hole into the right arm mount and the shoulder of the right arm. I was careful not to touch the Maltese cross as it was still drying at this point, however I would recommend letting it dry fully. But I pinned the right arm to the torso as I wanted to ensure that it be extra secure, as there was a lot of added weight from the shoulder, from the arm and the weapon. This isn't wholly necessary, but again, I'd recommend it. This was then super glued on, before then using plastic cement to fix the Sternguard veteran shoulder pad into place on that arm. I also then used plastic cement for the left arm and its shoulder pad. I then took a head from the Raven Wing Command kit, as I wanted a beaky helm, as I've always felt they look more fast. I know it sounds weird, it's just how my brain works, but I then applied this to the neck hole with, again, say it with me, more plastic cement. The jump pack was then glued on with, again, plastic cement, and lastly I made some wax details on the purity seals of the jump. So, I firstly figured out that the Black Templars don't do anything in half measures. So if anybody has watched the channel recently, or in the past, I added candles. I did this by taking 3 small lengths of dried thin rolled out milliput. I then superglued them over the leftmost purity seal, and continuing this, I rolled out some green stuff and placed it around the base of the stems. I took a metal sculpting tool and dragged the green stuff up and into the stems, and also away and down, like so, in order to create a wax dripping effect. I made the top parts of the candles by placing a blob of super glue on top of each of the stems, and then sticking a small ball of green stuff onto the top of this. I then pulled the blobs back into the stems of the candles, and then, after making a divot again with the metal sculpting tool, I then put some more super glue in there and added some small teardrops of green stuff to make the candle flames. These were then pushed backwards to again add more motion to the model. Lastly, I took a skull from the Citadel Skulls kit, cut it off the back, and stuck it to the other side of the jump pack. And after painting, I was left with this. I haven't based the model yet, as I don't know how I want to base the army, so any ideas would be greatly appreciated. I really wanted this model to have a more top-heavy feel and feel like an absolute freight train with a rocket on its back, and I think that I have achieved this suitably. I was also an idiot and lost the feet of the Havoc, so I did have to sculpt my own. However, I would recommend just sticking the feet on. Maybe cut the spiky toes off, but still. And I would lastly recommend that you pin your model to its base, like I will have done here. But thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time, where I will be adding to my repertoire of Chaos Lords with a blue Marine. Anyway, have a good couple weeks, and I'll see you next time.